Hey, this is Professor Homo. Welcome to part 4 of our web design workflow, where we're going to work on our CSS file, which is going to take our kind of raw HTML content and structure and start to present it in a nicer way so that it's centered, it has nice colors and fonts, and it's organized the way we want it. Columns are side by side, and we're going to do that all with CSS, and it's going to give us one file that we'll be able to make changes to in one place instead of going through a web page and searching through all this HTML code to make changes to the way something's colored or the font. We can do it in our CSS file. So one thing we have to do is start making our CSS file. We don't have one yet. We linked to one. Okay, here's our link that's in the top of our HTML page. That's linking to jlcstyles.css. And what I'm going to do to start is I'm going to make a new CSS file by going File, New, and I'm going to choose CSS and hit Create, and it'll open up a blank CSS document, and I'm going to first save it, and I'm going to save it as jlcstyles.css because that's what we named it, or when we linked to it, even though we didn't have it created yet. So now we have it created. We're going to save, and once I have it saved, I'm going to close it. The reason I'm going to close it is because in our HTML file, our index page, we could link to it. If there's a link, we could click right on it here and start making some changes. And the first two things I'm going to put in here is going to be a wildcard that removes, you see all these margins? There's margins around here. There's spaces between every paragraph. That's kind of default HTML, where it'll put all this extra space between paragraphs. It'll put a default margin. There'll be default padding. Things like that we want to get rid of and kind of reset back to 0. And to do that, I'm just going to paste this in here. We're going to put two things. Here's my first declaration, which is a wildcard. It has an asterisk, which makes the margins, all the margins 0 and all the padding 0. That asterisk is pretty much identifying everything. This next one we have here, this is basically using our section aside. All our HTML5 elements that we're using in the page, we're going to display them as block. And if we didn't put that, you may not notice anything, but that's for older browsers. So that's something that's recommended. And so we'll put that in there anyway, just for older browsers. Now, what should happen by putting this in here, and I'm going to hit save and save my CSS, when we preview it, it should remove all of that. Now, when I first did that, I was trying to figure out why it didn't. It should remove all these spaces and all these margins. And I'm going to go back to my CSS, and I looked and I was thinking, what did I do wrong here? And actually, I didn't do anything wrong. I have all my colons, semicolons, my curly brackets are closed, everything's saved. I'll go back to my HTML, and this is just troubleshooting. I'll go back to my source code, and I'll look at my link, and here's my link. My link looks okay. Link, rel, style sheet, ref, equals. Wait a minute. I forgot the equals. I didn't put the equals in here. That's one thing I forgot when I first typed this. I didn't put my equals in there. So now if I put equals in there, and now I go to design, now it actually works. So keep in mind that just little tiny things that you may not even notice can have a big impact. So there's what happens. It removed all that extra spacing, all that padding, margin is taken out of there now. Now that doesn't really help our layout, but it'll help it when we reset some of these styles. So I'm going to go back to my CSS file, and we're going to start putting some other things in here. And we can put one for HTML that adjust the background color of the page. For now, I'm going to leave it at white. But what I am going to put in here is some things for body. And I'm going to start it off by identifying the body element and putting my open and closing curly brackets. And I like to hit a return here. And I'll hit another return and bring this out. And that gives me a little place here to kind of put in some of my my declarations that are in here. And some of the things we'll put in here, here's one I'll put in, margin, colon, auto, and it's coming up here as auto. I'm going to put in that, and what that does, that centers. That's going to center all our body content on the HTML page. Our body content is most of the visible content. So that's going to center, margin auto will center that. It seems odd that it would use something like auto, but that's what will do that. Other things we could put in here, we could set the font family, font-family, and when you do that, when you hit the colon, it'll have some font families. I'm going to use the sans serif, and I'm just going to choose one of these in here. I'll choose this one, Trebuchet. That is actually, kind of a fairly common sans serif, but I'm going to throw some other ones in here. I'll put Calibri in here, and I'll put a comma, and I'll put Verdana. I'll put a comma. I could also put Tahoma in here because it sounds like my last name. I'll put that in here. There's also Trebuchet, Ariel, all these. I'm going to get Trebuchet out of there. I'll just have Ariel be the next one. That in Trebuchet, by the way, let me undo that. Trebuchet was in quotes because there's a space. If there's a space in the font itself, this one has a dash, but if there's a space, it needs quotes around it, and they'll show up in green in Dreamweaver. So I'm just going to get rid of that one. And the way this works is it's going to use font based on, you know, whichever will first come, first serve. It's going to use Calibri if someone doesn't have it. It's going to use Verdania, Tahoma, and so on. And make sure that you put your semicolon at the end. Any other defaults you want, you could put in here right now. I'm actually going to put the width of our body because we're setting that up to be 840. And I'm going to put 840px. Make sure you put the pixels. And what that'll do is it'll make everything be 840. That way I don't have to put in width for all my elements that are that wide. I will have to for the ones that are you know columns in the middle. I'll have to specify width. But for overall, if I go and split, or I should go and design now, you could see what it did. It made our width of everything 840, and we're still in order here. So it's putting our address, navigation, section, aside, footer. So it's in the order we want, and it's now it has all the margin gone, and now it also has it centered. And what we have to do is just put in some properties for some of these elements in here. And what I'm going to do first is put in properties for the address, which is kind of like a header, and also for the footer, because they're going to be the same. So I'm going to go in and do that, and I'll go back to my CSS. But before I do that, I'm just going to put one in for header. And you don't even have to put in anything yet. You could just kind of indicate that you're going to have one there. And then I'll put one for address. Now, because address is not an HTML element, it's actually in a div with an ID name. What you will need to do for this one is make sure that you put like a hashtag in front of the word address, indicating that it's an ID. So you have to just put the pound sign in front of that, and that'll help identify that. And then for address, we're going to put the font. We don't actually have to put the font, but we could put the font color, because we already have the font. Anything that's already identified here, declared here, then that's going to kind of be a precedent for everything else. So only when we override that do we have to put anything else. So, you know, the font family will be Calibri. We don't have to put that. But the color default right now is black, so we can put color white, and we can put background colors of that section and things like that. So we're going to do that next. Let me just pause for a second, and I'll put in some of those and explain them. Okay, I'm back, and here I put in 4 declarations for the address div. I put a height of 26, so for that section, that'll be how high it is. It was 26 pixels, and you remember from Photoshop, that's this thing here was 26 pixels high. There was a padding of 226. The text is white, and I think that's about it. So also, when I get back here, I'll show you that I also, you know, that's the height, that's the padding, that indents the text over about 226 pixels. Make sure to put the PX. I didn't put that in, and that could have been a problem. The color is white. You don't put font color, you actually just put color, and that'll rewrite the font color to be white, which FFF is a kind of a shortened version of the hex 6Fs, which would be white, or the 6Fs, which would be white. And then also line height, I should also put the PX in here. The line height is actually going to help center this, and I'm going to put a comment in here, and I'll just put centers text vertically. This is just a little note to myself with a CSS comment, which goes around the slash asterisk and then asterisk slash at the end, centers the text vertically. That's what that's going to do. So if I look at my design now, and I look at it live, and I did something wrong. Oh, I didn't put in my background color. So let me go back to that. I didn't put in a background color. I put in my font color, which is white, but I didn't put in my background color. And let me put that in, and it'll pop up here. Now you can navigate to that color, and I'm just going to jump to Photoshop real quick, because I should have had this written down, but I didn't write them down, but I know it's like 34 something. So let me just take my eyedropper and just see what that is. It's 34, 40, 27. I'll go back to Dreamweaver and just put in the pound sign, 34, 40, 27. I'll put a semicolon. And now when I go back to design, there I should see that. So that's the background color, there's the font color, there's my padding, which indents it over,